Alright, everybody, we should be going live right now. Give me a minute to deal with potential hiccups as far as the YouTube and the stream and all of these other things. We're running the baseball concurrently with the basketball. And want to make sure that we have this going and get the YouTube link retweeted out. But it is I, alone by my lonesome, hoping we can duplicate some of the success we had last night. 6 games tonight, 2 of them at 8 p.m., the rest of them spaced out pretty evenly over the course of the evening. So keeping an eye out for Z tweet, allowing a couple people to file in here, especially with me by my lonesome. Should be able to get through this in enough time to have the ability to talk about some questions afterwards. So I will filibuster vigilantly for the next minute or two, look for that link, and then run the retweet out there. Hey, there it looks like it is. So retweeting the link, let's go ahead and get into this evening slate. The sole 7 p.m. Game of the evening, the Pacers visiting the Celtics. Probably overall, I don't know, this and no, I like a number of members of Jazz. So yeah, this the game I have probably the least interest in. Looking overall at the slate, looking at the two main sites, the only player I legitimately like from this game on either side is I generally am a fan of the price of Marcus Morris on FanDuel. That being all the way down to 5,200 has done well in the past against the Pacers, against Thad, who gets the primary defensive assignment against him much of the time. One of the spots I would be interested in looking at, I don't have a problem with him on FanDuel, which is about the best endorsement you're going to get out of someone from this game. I know people are pretty high on Kyrie Irving tonight. I generally have him a good tier behind most of the other point guards at his price, either FanDuel or DraftKings. The guys in that range, I would rather play Trae Young. I would rather play Steph Curry. I would rather play Kemba Walker. I'd have to sit there for a while and think about Donovan Mitchell. But I have him under those guys. Counter argument, of course, being team certainly still jostling for playoff seeding, and Kyrie with obviously all the talent in the world, but the matchup is miserable on just about every level. I haven't had time to look this up, but I cannot recall the last time Kyrie Irving scored 50 fantasy points against the Pacers. It has been a real bugaboo for him. Celtics, Cavs, just about everywhere. Let's see. Last time the Cavs swept them out of the playoffs, he did not get to 50 fantasy points in any of those 4 games in the regular season. My downloads only go back 3 years, but he failed to get 50 in any of those 11 games. So he's over his last 15 to get 50 fantasy points, and I very possibly think you get that out of some of these other guys. He's obviously not out of play. I am not in any way shocked to see 60 points out of Kyrie Irving here, but the combination of historically bad matchup, on paper bad matchup, very badly paced game, I just, I don't know. I like Kyrie Irving just as much as the other guys, but it seems odd to me that he is as owned as we expect him to be, and other people like him that much. We do have him below Kemba. We have him at currently the same ownership as Trae Young, and I have Trae projected for 4.5 more fantasy points. If the ownership was additionally discounted, I can totally get going there. And again, I don't think he's out of play, but in a single lineup, he's like my point guard 6, and again, doesn't compare well to Kemba for $100 less, or Trae Young for $300 less, or on FanDuel, I'd rather find the money to get up to Dame Lillard, or possibly a Paul George-less Russell Westbrook, or Kemba at that price. Or it's a tough spot for me. Someone says the only Celtics who've had standout games against the Pacers recently are Marcus Morris and Jaylen Brown. Yeah, again, I don't. That means not too much for me. I enjoy a good game log watch as much as the next guy, maybe more than the next guy. But 1 or 2 games doesn't mean a ton to me. But I can go back a few years and like the spot for a couple reasons for Marcus Morris. At the Jaylen Brown price, I would actually probably rather Gordon Hayward if I'm going to throw $4,600 on DraftKings at a wing. FanDuel, though, where Jaylen Brown is $4,800 and shooting guard eligible. Especially with the sort of the news that would give us a recent downgrade to Kent Bazemore. I'm a little more tolerant of that, but single game, I'm not super concerned if you don't have anyone from this game. DraftKings, I don't mind Marcus Smart at $4,800 just about any day. I don't mind Kyrie Irving. He's going to be the highest scoring of those 3 mid-8 point guards 20-25% of the time. I just don't see the need particularly to go there in a single lineup. Jason Tatum is still a little underpriced. Sure, you can get a ceiling there at $5,700. Al Horford at $6,000. Not a great matchup. Generally hasn't done that well here either, but again, $6,000 is a price he can clearly get on top of. So would have some smattering of these guys if I was building 20 or 100 lineups in one lineup. I'm not going to get a whole lot of this game. I don't like the matchup for Wesley Matthews. He's cheap and should give you his 30 minutes, but I don't really want to go there next to guys who are a little cheaper or in faster games or both. Darren Collison, as I suspected last game when he was kind of popular, came back and his minutes were limited, and the matchup is again really bad for him. One lineup, I don't think I'm going there. Maybe if I'm building 100, I get a share or two on DK where he's 5,600 and hope he gets 30 minutes and has a good game in a difficult matchup. Not terribly inclined to do so. On DK, I can see taking some shares of the front court. I would actually rather go with Miles Turner here at $6,000 than Sabonis at $6,200, which is the inverse of what I wanted last game. The Deuce, Thaddeus Young, $5,400. Cheap enough, he can certainly get there. Even Tyreek Evans, but yeah, not a ton to like in this game. I will happily take more questions on it, but would rather discuss games that I have a little bit more of appeal for. Let's go ahead and move on to the only 7:30 game, which is Portland visiting the Hawks. Only a 3-point line here to give you an idea of when you take McCollum and Nurkic out of there, just how much worse this team gets. When you're only favored by 3 over the Hawks, that's really saying something, and there's a reason that teams in the West are sort of angling to try to get to get the first round matchup against Portland here. I'm inclined to go right back at Damian Lillard. That last game was obviously an aberration. The usage concerns me more than the poor shooting. 3 of 12 in a really good matchup, obviously concerning, but just the 12 shots much more concerning for me than happening to only make 3. I don't think Damian Lillard forgotten how to shoot a basketball. But again, that was a blowout. The Hawks are just outright better than the Bulls. Vegas and I both expect this game to stay a little bit closer. Against the Hawks, very rarely will you find guys who expected to play some number of minutes who I don't like in tournaments, and there's really no difference here. A lot of the secondary options priced a little bit better here. I guess we'll start at the top with what I expect to be one of the more popular guys from this game. Enes Kanter, $5,900 on FanDuel is actually even better. $5,500 on DK is a perfectly equitable price. He probably has to remain my favorite center of the evening by a hair. But that price is too cheap. The ownership is not quite as execrable as I was worried it would be. Right now we have him at only 23% on DK. There's a big ceiling for him here. Going back to the Knicks, he's been able to, obviously hit some giant upsides. He's an excellent rebounder. The price is just simply too cheap. I have him for 28 minutes. Other people have come in under that. Again, if you looked at that last game, it was a blowout. He didn't play in the fourth quarter, and I presume he would have played 6, 7, 8 minutes. I'm not shocked if you see 30 here. If the game stays close, I'd be pretty surprised if you saw under 25. Now, it's not an impossibility that he gets benched because, he just can't stop Trae Young driving to the lane. He gets absolutely demolished in the pick and roll. I can see a number of ways this goes sideways for him. But generally, I think he'll probably be fine. It isn't the hardest matchup for him. I do think tough sledding is ahead with the upcoming matchups with Valanciunas and Towns and other centers who probably will present more of difficulty for him in the next few games. But I imagine he gets clear here and has at least a halfway decent game. There is a big ceiling. And I do think the minutes will be okay. They were going to give him a significant load to start with. I see no reason for that to change here. So generally, I'm a fan of Enes Kanter, and if we have him at 23% owned, which is exactly what we have Lillard at, I would come in on the top of both of those guys. Again, this is a team with a number of guys who are otherwise offensively somewhat inept between Aminu and Harkless and Layman, who will get the start. So, yeah, I like Lillard and Kanter, and if our ownership projections are correct, I would get on top of those. Now, Lillard, for me right now, I have projected for 4 fantasy points more than Russell Westbrook. If Paul George is out, I would have him for about 5 fantasy points less than Russell Westbrook. So, at the moment, especially at their current ownership, I'm wanting to have Lillard, and I expect to get news during this show on the status of Paul George. So if Paul George is out, yes, I'm going to want to try to convert that Damian Lillard ownership to Russell Westbrook if I was you. I don't mind Jake Layman as a minimum price drop on FanDuel. I think he's in play in tournaments on DK. Mo Harkless, I legitimately like at that price on DraftKings at 4,300. He can do a lot of things for this team, score in a lot of ways. This is an Atlanta team that plays fast, turns over the ball plenty. All these things play into his hands. Same thing with Aminu, perfectly in play on FanDuel at 55. I like him a lot on DK at 4,700. I think a lot of my lineups on DK, the most frequent outlook I would have would be Lillard and Kanter and another Trailblazer, because the others are simply priced too cheaply. I don't have a problem with Zach Collins. I actually like him quite a bit. There's some chance of a blowout either way in this game, as there's in just about every game. He would close out that game. Both 51 at a sticky position on FanDuel and 4,400 on DK look fine for me. I would slightly rather play him than identically priced Seth Curry. I have no problem with Seth Curry, even with Justin Anderson news, which we'll get to in a second. I would still slightly prefer Kent Bazemore, though I've had to reduce his minutes projection by a decent bit with J.A. getting the start for him. Rodney Hood not out of play. Again, it's just a fine matchup. A lot of those are supplemental pieces. But for me, it's going to be Lillard as the favorite as far as just how much I like him in general. Followed up by Kanter. Followed up by probably Harkless. Then Aminu, then Curry, then Collins. And then those other supplemental pieces in the Hood and or Layman category. Looking at the Hawks, I was surprised Justin Anderson started. Trent Bazemore missed, I want to say 2 or 3 games 4 or 6 weeks ago. I think that was due to the birth of a child, with him, I believe, still technically doubtful, by the way. Oh, no, he's out. Justin Anderson getting the start. I currently have Justin Anderson at 16 minutes. I don't think he is out of play on FanDuel. This matchup is a lot better than it's going to look in any projections or rankings when you take McCollum and Nurkic out of there and add in Seth Curry's and Jake Layman's and Enes Kanter's. Your defense is going to get a lot worse, and you can see that in the projected over-under for this game and the close line. So even though I think he probably plays minutes in the mid-teens, he's going to be my favorite 3K flat player, I'm pretty sure, on DK. As far as playing Justin Anderson. Him getting the start reduced my projection for Kent Bazemore from 28 minutes to 24 minutes, reduced my projection for DeAndre Bembry from 24 minutes to 20. So again, I have Anderson 16, Bembry 20, Bazemore 24. I still like Bazemore just fine on FanDuel. DK at this point, it's going to come down to an ownership question. If you looked at those last games that Prince was out, you saw Bazemore getting the start and playing 27.5, 28 minutes several games in a row. Bembry coming off the bench and getting 22, 24 minutes most of those games. I'm going to have to presume Anderson getting the start pulls those numbers down a little bit. I do prefer Bazemore straight up to Bembry, but he makes a very interesting pivot from Bazemore and other popular cheap wing guys. And again, I would have been a much more strong advocate of Bazemore had him getting the start. It's a little dicey at this point. I like Trae Young. I like him more than Kyrie Irving, even a little bit on DK, and obviously quite a bit. It's a $1,400 less on FanDuel. I have him a little bit behind Kemba Walker on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I'd slightly prefer Trae at the relative prices there. Kevin Huerter is in play for me again. Dude's going to play 30 minutes, can get hot. Came off a disappointing game where I liked him a lot, but still 4,300, 4,100. And you feel the minutes are more secure with Anderson starting next to him as opposed to Taurean Prince. Certainly someone I think we should consider. Let's move on to the two 8 p.m. games real quick. Denver, the only team playing on the back end of a back-to-back going into Oklahoma City. They are running a nice tight rotation as far as the number of players in it, but the minutes are spread out a little more than we'd be happy with. It's worth pointing out that the Celtics, again, do play again tomorrow. They are in Brooklyn tomorrow, so that's another reason to have little more concern. The Pacers actually also run. I'm just going to look up the list because I didn't think to download it, but I think the Pacers play tomorrow as well. So the Nuggets are the only team on the back end of a back-to-back. The front end, the Celtics are at the Nets tomorrow, and the Pacers are at the Magic tomorrow. So all sorts of games, all these with real playoff consideration in them. The Timberwolves have the 76ers tomorrow, and Portland has the Pistons tomorrow. So there are your teams on some measure of a back-to-back. Again, Denver, the only team on the back end of it. However, as far as Denver goes, my favorite player per site is going to be Jamal Murray on DraftKings. I think 5,900 for him is really well too cheap, especially where we have him projected. I like him a ton. Has been above average against Westbrook. I like the matchup. I'll like the matchup even more if Paul George is out, forcing Westbrook to spend even more energy on the plus side of the court. Not that he doesn't have a seemingly endless abundance of energy, but that sort of thing does matter for me. So that for Denver, by far for me, my favorite player site. 5,900 is too cheap for him. This is the fourth time they've played this year. He had like 30, 35, and 40. I have him projected for 34 at 5,900. That's just a very nice projection with a reasonably safe floor, and I do think a real kind of ceiling there. So I like Jamal Murray. Minutes have been up and down, but if you look at the 2 games out of the last 4 in which he played fairly limited minutes, both of those were blowouts. Moving on beyond that, next would be, again, DK. Paul Millsap, 6,200. Just carries too much of an upside for that after that same conversation. Nikola Jokic at 9,400. I like only slightly less in tournaments because of his ownership relative to Karl Anthony Towns. Is Justin Anderson even a player, or is he just an asshole? I recall some sort of off-the-court thing about him, and I can't remember what it is. Obviously, a guy who's moved team to team, 76ers. But is he a play? I would have little or none. He's probably my favorite $3,000 play on DK. The matchup not brilliant for the Hawks, and again, I'd be surprised if he goes from playing 7, 8, 10 minutes a night to 28 in a start here, and not a great fantasy guy. So, for me, on the very fringes of being a playable guy. Let me get back to, sorry, loading up all the chats and everything. Let me get back to that which I was discussing. Jokic at 94 is just a guy who carries a ton of an upside. The ownership is down from a number of substandard performances recently. We've seen low minutes, we've seen low usage, we've seen low shots, and I don't really care that much. Has been above average against the Thunder, against Steven Adams in the past. Had 1 bad game and 2 60 pluses this year, and I don't need to sell you on how good that looks at 9,400, and especially if you're going to get him well less owned than Karl Anthony Towns, who I like just plenty and carries a similar, if not greater, upside, and who has looked better. But there's, a very significant chance you get 50, 55, 60 out of Jokic tonight. 9,400 is just too cheap. 10.5 on FanDuel is just too cheap. I would certainly have some exposure there. I'd be over the field, which I think, again, we project to be fairly small. I'll do a full ownership chatty when we get there, but we have Nikola Jokic at 10%. I imagine I would be closer to 20, and I don't have an issue with him in your single GPP lineup if he slots in better than, say, Towns or whomever else you're considering at that position. Looking at the supplemental pieces, again, everyone priced a little bit better on DraftKings. I probably would go with Barton first with very little confidence. But yeah, level of appeal for me would probably be Murray, Millsap, Jokic, Barton, Harris. I don't mind Monty Morris in tournaments either site, droppable on FanDuel. Something goes hooey with Jamal Murray, chance he gets 25, 30 minutes, runs the offense in the blowout. But again, obviously, and don't have him in the same lineup as Jamal Murray if you can avoid it. Looking across the ball at the Thunder, obviously, as of this news, this is an 8 p.m. game. We still don't have specific news on Paul George. Hopefully that comes out in 10 or 15 minutes. They tend to about 90 minutes before lock. Give us some news there. If it gets pushed forward that he is a game-time decision, I'm going to be fine playing Russell Westbrook regardless. It is a fine matchup for him. Again, I haven't projected a few points less than Damian Lillard right now. If we know definitely that Paul George is in, I would rather play Damian Lillard. If we know that Paul George is out, I would rather play Russell Westbrook, and hopefully you can make those adjustments coming up with the $400 or $600 differential on price between FanDuel and DraftKings respectively to make that upgrade in that context. I like Dennis Schroeder on FanDuel regardless of Paul George's status. Even if you don't know anything about Paul George, I'm a fan of $5,400 Dennis Schroeder. If you find out Paul George is in, probably the first guy I would swap that to, if you wanted to swap, would be an underpriced for the upside against the Lakers. Jeremy Lamb, who's sitting at 55 there. Pretty hard to get to 6 on DraftKings for him, but some appeal there. I still only have him at 27 minutes, but you could get 30 out of him. And again, it's worth pointing out that's a Charlotte team, which we'll get to in a little bit, but has climbed back into playoff relevancy here. They're up to 15, 18, 20% chance of making the playoffs, depending what projection system you're looking at. So they want to win this game. And again, one of many reasons, and not a back-to-back, that I would prefer going with, say, Kemba over Kyrie. T-Ferg is better if Paul George is out. If Paul George is out, I'm going to like everyone else on this team a lot more. Jeremy Grant, Steven Adams, Russell Westbrook, Terrence Ferguson becomes playable from pretty close to unplayable previously. You can then play Markieff Morris. I like Steven Adams a little bit more. Paul George, a game times decision. Somebody just sent it me. I don't know if that's new or just a restating of something I'd seen. Paul George shoulder, a game time decision. Look at that, right on cue, 20 seconds ago. Right as we're talking about it. So, I want to check a couple things on the Hawks rotation regarding what they're doing with Jalen Adams and Bazemore and how they're switching with each other off the bench to get a slightly better view on a couple things. So I'm going to go dead air or mumbling to myself for a minute here, for which I do apologize. Yeah, again, I still like Bazemore plenty on FanDuel. On DK, I'm thinking you try to get somewhere else if you can work it into your lineup. I have real concern for him. I actually now have him at 22 minutes, which is even more concerning because I don't think he ends up next to Trey that much. Yeah, so roll your expectations back there a hair more. 37 FanDuel, still pretty exciting. 38 DK. Gonna try to do something else if I possibly can. Okay. Let's get back to talking about it for a second here. But yeah, I like Schroeder plenty. Again, that last game was a bit of an aberration. He shot dreadfully and only played 20 whatever minutes. But before that, they had been going small more often. And he was getting 30, 32, 34, 35 minutes regularly with all hands on deck, adding the potentiality that you have Paul George out. And he's certainly not dead if he's in. I don't hate the matchup. And the price on FanDuel is especially advantageous. And the ownership would be limited by the sense of insecurity about Paul George. For all those reasons, I like Dennis Schroeder. I don't think Paul George is out of play on FanDuel. There's some interesting game theory differences in playing on FanDuel and DraftKings tonight. Looking at small forward on FanDuel, you have a couple interesting punts from the Troy Browns at the minimum price still, to the DeAndre Bembry's, to the Dwayne Bacons, up to the high-priced options. A lot of the mid-range guys aren't priced particularly appealingly. So I right now in the one FanDuel GPP lineup I have in front of me have LeBron James in there. I feel like that's correct. I have him projected more slightly than Paul George if he's in, and a good bit more than Kevin Durant. I think the ownership is limited due to he is LeBron. People seem to think he still has some sort of minutes limit, which I do think, I have him projected for 35 minutes. They announced that he would play 28 to 32 and then gave that up promptly after 2 goddamn games. They are home, which is really relevant. I think they are playing for, appearance sake and the home crowd to a certain extent. And he's, if you look at the games he's rested, 2 of the last 6 or 7, I want to say, both those were road games. And this, all apropos of me liking even at 11.3 on FanDuel, which points per dollar is probably maybe the worst play in my lineup. I still like playing him just because I think he scores more raw points, and you're going to end up with Drop and LeBron if he scores the most points at small forward is quite possibly your ideal lineup construction there. But again, I have no issue with Paul George if he plays. Dicey to go there and deal with potential 0 at 10-4 on FanDuel. Not out of play because you will get him at 3%. Just understand you're obviously making a risky play. Kevin Durant really, taking more of a backseat in this offense for the Warriors over the last couple weeks. Just not very involved. Has managed to have a couple decent games, but all those based on hyper-accurate shooting where he makes 12 of 13 from the field like he did in the last game and he gave you 50. The 5 games before that, FanDuel scoring, just because I have it up, 32, 34, 36, 36, 38. None of that is very exciting at $9,500. Minnesota's defense has turned into a train wreck. There's a reason they're still double-digit dogs even at home. Yeah, that's sort of just long way around talking about the conversation of George versus Durant versus LeBron James, which if you're playing on FanDuel, I think is an important decision to make. No problem with Markieff Morris as a drop on FanDuel. You're hoping to get there, but there's some sort of upside. So if you slot it into that spot for you on FanDuel, I don't think that's unreasonable in tournaments as a drop play. The other 8 p.m. game alluded to a moment ago, Golden State going into Minnesota. Again, Golden State's really hard to take guys from. My favorite guy from this team, if I had to pick here, on FanDuel is barely Steph Curry. On DraftKings would end up being DeMarcus Cousins again. I think you get him lower owned than JaVale McGee. I have him projected a little less than JaVale McGee. But that price is still advantageous for him. The matchup for him and JaVale, for what it's worth, are both very, very good. Fine against Towns in the past. DK, that price gets him there for me a little bit. FanDuel slightly prefers Steph Curry. Usually very good against the Timberwolves. This also their 4th matchup. Would not shock me if Curry was the leading scorer all 3 of the previous games. I'll look that up if I get a second. But it favors him a little bit more than the other guys. Clay's price is a little more than I want to play. Durant, as I mentioned, is just coming down in usage and productivity over the last couple weeks, and the price hasn't fallen commensurately yet. So for me on DK, I would have Cousins, Curry. On FanDuel, I would have Curry, Cousins. Third for me on both sides would be Draymond Green. That price, however, is low enough that you can just spike his steal, block, assist upside game when he's down to 67 on FanDuel, where scoring does particularly benefit him with 3 for a steal and a block, or DK where he's just 5,800. I like Draymond Green quite a bit at those prices. He's only a little bit behind Cousins and Curry for me, and I think 30, 30, and 40 approximately in the 3 games this year against Minnesota. So again, that all profiles just fine for him. Not looking anywhere other than the starters. Even in the event there is a blowout in this game, which has around a 10-point line, very rarely do you see Golden State guys getting there off the bench. And this is a team that is involved in some fair number of blowouts, and they still very rarely get there. Minnesota, everybody's hurt still. No Teague, no Rose, no Taj is out again. No Lou Aldeng, no Robert Covington, so they will be running the same team they've been running for quite some time now. Towns, obviously the centerpiece here. I have no objection to anyone playing Towns in any lineup. His level of production, basically since the trade deadline, since everyone went out, has been supreme, averaging, I think, somewhere north of 1.6 fantasy points a minute. I'm not terribly worried about the matchup for him. He does carry, it's not quite as good as, say, Embiid last night, who we talked about, but it is a similar situation, which just he is the center who is offering you gigantor upside. Talking about my favorite centers last night, which again was Embiid, Drummond, Mitch Robinson I had third, and Capella fourth. My big argument was points per dollar. I actually slightly preferred all 3 of the other guys. I'm not sure if Drummond quite got there, and even Capella didn't get there at about 6 for 1, because Embiid, even at his 10-4, gave you 7 for 1. But it was the fact that you can just get an enormous number, and if you're looking for an enormous number here at center, you're going to get it out of Karl Anthony Towns much more likely than any of these other guys who have a more restrictive ceiling. The price on Dario Saric on FanDuel has rebounded to a point where he's no longer the sort of auto play when Taj was out and he was $4,100. That was a really fine spot. We can project him to get 27, 28 minutes still. Not super exciting. I'm just fine with Andrew Wiggins in any tournament format you want to put him in. He can simply take tons and tons of shots, and again, when you have Tyus and Saric and Okogie out there next to Wiggins and Towns, those are the guys who are going to carry a lot of the water, not that differently from, say, Portland, which we were talking about, 6'7" and 6'1" being the tags for Wiggins. I think he's a strong tournament play, and I'm really inclined to get him in there if you don't have Towns, just because you're getting some immediate leverage on the field with that play. Beyond those two guys, Tyus Jones on DK sort of as a cash play. I think he probably gets you 25, 30, maybe 35. That feels okay for his 5,400, but not a ton of other guys here I'm super interested in. Again, gonna dead air for a second here. Check all my news and alerts. Nothing there. Nothing there. And nothing there. Is it a 3-point guard night or a 2-center night with the utility spot? I'm a little more inclined to 3-point guard. Now, that's based on me having a lot of affection for 4-point guards. I think the last lineup I built was Lillard and Jamal Murray and Kemba Walker and Ricky Rubio, which you can do because Jamal Murray, another reason I really like him, is he is shooting guard eligible, unlike all three of the rest of those. Yeah, Kemba, Rubio, and Lillard are all point guards only. You can play Jamal Murray at your shooting guard spot, so in theory you can stack in 4, and I believe I will find it. I haven't tinkered with my DK lineup in quite some time. Here we are. Yes. I currently have all 4 of those guards in. So look, there's half a DK lineup, which generally I'm not supposed to do. But yeah, Kemba, Rubio, Murray, and Lillard all priced really well for me. Murray at 59 and Rubio at 55 certainly carry large ceilings in matchups that I like. Let's move on. 2 games to go, making decent time, I think. And again, if I miss anything, we'll go to the premium Slack chat first to field questions about this evening's slate. Washington gonna go get a butt whooping in Utah. They played just a couple weeks ago in Washington, and Utah blew them out in Washington. Now they potentially may not have Bradley Beal. Again, this game is 2 hours post-lock. Even if Bradley Beal is out, I'm not really gonna like anyone on Washington. Some of them will be in play. If Bradley Beal plays, he's only $9,200 on FanDuel, which is dollar for dollar less than he is on DraftKings. That price is not out of play for me. I can see Bradley Beal putting up, 60 tonight against the Jazz. I don't think it's very likely. We expect the minutes to be a little more limited. My guess is he doesn't play. I'll go 60-40 he doesn't play tonight for what it's worth. They've, after resisting a lot of questions about resting him, we had a We'll See today. It's been brought up a couple times. A lot of reporters have asked. And this is as bad of an environment as you are going to get going into Utah. This seems like a spot that they may very well sit him. He will probably sit 1 game. The coach has come out and said no one else is he looking to sit but him. He wants to see more time out of Portis and Bryant and Parker. They're trying to figure out what to do with this team in the futures. But we expect a Beal rest. And again, going into Utah, largest line of the light, really potential blowout. You got to want it. But 2% Beal on FanDuel at 9,200. I think if I was building 150 lineups, I'd get over the 2% by having 4%. But there's obviously a lot of risk there. If Beal is out, Satoransky is priced advantageously enough that I don't hate going there around 6K at his expected ownership. Again, getting to be full-ass point guard for 35 minutes would make the situation for him more beneficial than games where Beal plays 40 minutes in a worse matchup. He just goes from expected assists of 4 to expected assists of 8, and expected shots of 8 to expected shots of 12, and just would project nicely for me, so I'd be fine with that. I don't mind Troy Brown at minimum price on FanDuel. He has been bad. He is getting you 2/3 of a fantasy point a minute. He is going into Utah, there's nothing great about it except minimum price and potentially Beal being out. You would think his minutes probably kick back closer to 30. And in even the worst of situations, $3,500 small forward, 30 minutes would be pretty good for him. I don't want to pay the price on Portis or Bryant or Parker tonight. And a couple of people have told me they think Parker is an excellent play here. I don't see it. I'm not certain of the minutes. Again, there's no Trevor Ariza. That obviously helps, but there's a big butt kicking potentially here. I'm not sure Jeff Green plays 9 minutes again. Don't see the need to go with him, but there's just guys I like more at the wing more. So the rest of this team, I'm just going to sort of give the wave to. I do think Jabari Parker, especially on FanDuel where he is more advantageously priced, does carry enough of an upside. And then the past guy beyond that would be Jordan McRae. I'm fine with Jordan McRae on DraftKings, especially in tournaments at 3,300. Real chance he gets 27 minutes here if this game gets completely out of control. And he's going to gun. So DK, I would certainly rather go there. Horder or Bacon for a DK GPP? I would play Horder. I right now have them at 31 minutes for Horder and 24 for Bacon. With Batum back, I don't know how that goes. Last game Batum was there, Bacon started, but only played 18 or 19 minutes. Game before that Batum was there, he played 24, 25. It's obviously a great matchup. I have no issue if you want to play Bacon, but I think you get Horder at lower ownership in a perfectly decent spot. And again, I have him for getting a full 35% more minutes. I couldn't get away from that in a single spot. As far as the Jazz goes, pretty amusing pricing with Rudy Gobert incredibly too cheap on DraftKings and incredibly too expensive on FanDuel. 10-3 on FanDuel, I would have a lot of trouble getting to. 7,800 on DK makes him probably my favorite center. Be a conversation with him and NS Canner. If this game stays close, he should be a monster. Like if you told me that he played 33 minutes, I'd have him projected for like 49 fantasy points. So even in a blowout, I think it's likely you're getting into the 35-40. Like the floor is reasonably secure. I like Rudy Gobert quite a bit. In one tournament lineup, I would still run him over Cousins even for the $700 more. I have him pretty similarly to Cantor, so that's going to come into just how much money you have left. Again, the DK prices on most of these guys a lot better. The exception being Donovan Mitchell. Again, shooting guard not as delicious as it's been recently. No Devin Booker floating around. Difficult spot for Bradley Beal, etc. So if you're paying up a shooting guard on FanDuel, Donovan Mitchell 8,500 certainly makes a fair amount of sense. That is a better price than the 8 flat on DraftKings. Just certainly not out of play, but again, you want this game to stay close. Having Rubio in there reduces Mitchell's projection just because of assists pretty significantly, so obviously he can get there against the Wizards. Feel free to have some, but his price is still a little bit high and hasn't quite normalized enough for Rubio being back and playing somewhere around 30 minutes. I like Rubio a lot at 5,500. It's a just fine spot for him, especially if there's not a blowout. He should do very well versus that price. And again, we're just talking about a lot of these guys tonight. There's a lot of guys who cost 5,500, $6,000 that I think carry 45, 50 point upsides. And so I see myself being balanced a lot. That combined with the fact that, especially with the Justin Anderson news, all our value got a little more specious. So I am a little more interested in sort of a more balanced lineup. Andrew Bogut available to play. Not an irrelevant takeaway from Boogie Cousins. Not super relevant, but I would reduce Boogie's projection by 90 seconds or something like that. Thoughts on Crowder? Let me double check. I don't have his prices up in front of me, and I think he was down to 4,500 on DK, which is somewhat interesting for me. Yeah, 4,500 on DK I think is just fine. Would generally prefer that to a $5,800 favors. Nothing wrong with $5,800 favors. Seeing lots of Bryant and Portis and other guys. The FanDuel prices on these guys: 7,000 for Engel, 7,500 for favors. Those are pretty tough for me to get to. Matchup is fine. I'd have a share or two in large tournaments if I was entering many lineups. Let's move on to another game that I do like a bit more, that more likely to stay competitive. Pace obviously much more appealing. Nearly close to an even line. Charlotte visiting the Lakers. Again, Charlotte with quite a bit to play for here. They did play earlier this year. Absolutely nothing to take away from this game. They played in Charlotte. LA spanked the shit out of them. If you don't remember that game, you probably will when I tell you it was the game where LeBron and Lonzo triple-doubled, if that rings a bell. They destroyed Charlotte. Kemba had his worst game of the year. I believe he played somewhere around 26 minutes and had single-digit fantasy points. It weren't good. That means absolutely nothing. Just thought I'd bring it up for trivia. Not having Lonzo there, as anyone who's a Lonzo fan, such as myself, will tell you, has radically changed the defensive outlook of this team. I like Kemba quite a bit. He would be my favorite of those mid 8K price tag guys. As I alluded to a little while ago, Charlotte has a real chance at the playoffs now. They are somewhere between 15 and 20% likely. They want to win this game. And Kemba has shown the ability to absolutely go James Harden on people's ass recently. He's been really impressive. The guy who I've had the most, wow, this guy is playing really well moments this year might be Kemba Walker. Difficult to translate that into any sort of fantasy context, but the 60-point ceiling is absolutely there in a game against LA. I like Kemba quite a bit. Dwayne Bacon in play for me. The return of Batum makes his minutes sketchy. I have him at 24. I'm not shocked if you see 30. Even while moving towards the playoffs, we have started to see more of the kids on this team, which is really interesting. I like the fact that they embraced their youth movement and rattled off a few wins. Generally looking to go elsewhere. I would rather Mo Harkless than Dwayne Bacon. But Bacon very much in play, just some degree of uncertainty, and I think you can do slightly better with other guys. Miles Bridges in play. Again, all these guys going to be in play against the Lakers, basically. Again, I think I can do slightly better with wing players at similar prices. I'm going to take Portland guys against Atlanta a lot, so slightly prefer Aminu, who saves you 200 on DK, I think. But again, if I'm building 150 lineups, I have probably something like 20 Aminu and 7 or 8 Miles Bridges. I think he's very much in play. I like Marvin Williams a lot. It's not a safe play. I prefer him on FanDuel, where the 4,300 is better than the 4,000 on DK, and you can drop him. I think there is... I haven't projected up for his minutes. I have him at 29 tonight. There is a real chance that doesn't happen. It depends how much time he gets at center, which has something to do with how nuts JaVale is going, which has something to do with how much time they give to Bacon, which affects Batum, which affects down to... how much time they give to Frank. So there's certainly some uncertainty there. But at 4,300 on FanDuel, after Kemba, who I'd even prefer slightly at 10 grand, probably Marvin ends up being my second favorite guy. Jeremy Lamb, I'm very worried about the minutes. They had come down anyway. He is obviously not 100%. I do think he plays here in the event Paul George is in, and we got that news by 7 o'clock. I would slightly prefer Jeremy Lamb for the upside. Willie Hernan-Gomez, I think, is fine as sort of a punt or a tournament guy. Obviously, we're dealing with a guy who is a real liability on the minute side of the court, but has been getting his 20 minutes basically on the regular. I will make sure I'm not speaking out of my ass here, but I'm fairly certain his rotation is settled a bit. Yeah, last 4 games, 22 minutes, 20 minutes, 17 minutes, 23 minutes. Fantasy production, 20, 22, 31, 18. FanDuel, I'd probably look somewhere else as a punt, but 3,600 on DK if you're throwing it away. Not throwing it away necessarily, but the matchup is still very good for him. I'm not shocked if you get another 30 out of him against the Lakers. So in tournaments, I legit like Willie. I don't think Bismack is entirely out of play, but on DK at 3,400 and 150 lineups, I'd have something like, I don't know, a dozen Willie and 2 or 3 Biyombo, I think would be about where I would expose myself. The Lakers, strong matchup, but having LeBron back makes everyone a little bit less appealing. Starting with JaVale. JaVale has obviously looked brilliant. Spoke about how he's fully recovered from his mid-season pneumonia. And someone hilariously tweeted, I think one of our people, wow, I didn't realize pneumonia lasted 10 years. That's pretty funny. I don't think he's been in the league quite 10 years, but JaVale certainly, quality at this point. He has looked legitimately good. The matchup for him is exceptional to really exceptional. Like Biyombo, that's a really good matchup. Willie Hernan-Gomez, I might be able to, get a couple buckets on. But the existence of LeBron makes even JaVale a little bit worse than he would have been if LeBron wasn't there for me. Concerned with Lance now. certainly in play. FanDuel 4,200 would prefer to 4,100 on DK. Feel free to do that. Kuzma works with LeBron back, 65 and 63. Can certainly do it. No issue within tournaments. I would have a good amount of Kuzma. Bullock, we don't know what's going to happen. Playable on FanDuel where he's min price droppable. Probably don't want to go there on DK. Rondo, I like a lot in tournaments. It's been decent against Kemba in the past, which isn't an imposing defensive matchup for basically anyone. Risky, obviously. LeBron back doesn't help him, but still at 6K, you can get 40, 45-point games out of Rondo. So I would not hate going there. And we are through the slate with 13 minutes to go. I'm going to start looking at some of your questions starting in our premium Slack chat. Someone said, well, this sucks. I wish I knew what that was referring to. Millsap and Cantor or Gobert and Bridges on DK. I would have to go look at my projections, but I'm going to have those very, very close to each other. I suspect I would have Millsap and Cantor by a hair, but I'm absolutely fine with either of those. Is Beal playing? We don't know. Fantasy Cruncher is down. I imagine that's what someone was saying sucked. And you guys are pretty lame on the questions here. Thoughts on Dedmon / John Collins? Yeah, I didn't specifically talk about that. Thanks. I like John Collins a lot on DraftKings. $6,900. There's just a really big upside there. Their defense in the front court is again going to be much, much worse when you put Cantor in there and take Nurkic out. I know I've said it a couple times, but it can't be overstated. John Collins, if he can get his head out of his ass and not foul out, is a 20-10 guy in a game with nice pace that projects to stay close. I really like John Collins at $6,900. Dedmon I like less. Obviously, power forward eligibility as a center. Nice, $5,600. Perfectly tolerable price. Minutes have been coming up. And a very good defender, honestly. Above average in any case. One of the few pieces of concern I have for Cantor. Not terribly relevant for me. But playing, say, Dedmon instead of Cantor at, I believe, a $100 differential between those two players, I think is very cute, and again, you could certainly play them both if you're stacking up this game, so I like Dedmon less than Collins. Say 6,900 Collins, greater upside for me. Minutes feel a little bit more secure as opposed to $5,600 Dwayne Dedmon, but I'm fine with getting the Undertaker in there. If I was running 20 lines, how much LeBron James would I have? I imagine it would be pretty similar site to site. DraftKings, I suspect I would have, with the current news we have, somewhere around 6. FanDuel, I suspect I would have somewhere around 8. Aminu or Harkless factoring in ownership? Yeah, let's talk about ownership. I mentioned we would do that since you guys are so poor with the damn questions today. Let's take a look at some of our DraftKings ownership. And again, you can see the complete list by being an Awesemo.com member. I presume we have some sort of great deal. Wait, is our ownership down? Is the site down? What's going on? Hair on fire. They don't call him the best color man in the business for nothing. I thought you guys were saying Fantasy Cruncher is down. Awesome appears to be down. Now, you may have a sprint router out or something that is taking down a number of websites across the internet. I don't know. But Batum, a good pivot away from Bacon. He is cheaper. Really? Yeah. I'm a fan of that. He's obviously, I didn't realize he was down to that cheap. So many point guards to choose from on FanDuel GPP. Can you please rank your top 4? Yeah, I think that's a good question. And again, the chats and the things are being a little dicey for me. So if you want to send me, tweet me a question, I will accept them by that genre as well. It is pretty close for me. If you look at your top point guards here, you have Westbrook 11-3, Lillard 10-9, Kyrie 10 flat, Kemba 10 flat, Curry 9-6, Trae Young 8-7, Jamal Murray 7-2. I think all those plays are just fine. I probably like Kyrie Irving at 10K the least. Obviously, Kyrie could get you 60, could play 35 minutes, but again, on the back-to-back, difficult matchup historically and on paper, blah, 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 etc., etc. I'm going to play Kemba Walker against the Lakers over Kyrie Irving. I'm going to spend $900 more for Damian Lillard. Right now, I am dead 50-50 on whether or not Paul George plays. I expect that Russell Westbrook will be more highly owned than Damian Lillard. For that reason, I probably still prefer Damian Lillard. Hey, site back. Let's look at ownership projections. Okay. On DraftKings, let's get into here. Kemba Walker, 29%. That feels pretty good. I'd be about there because, again, I do like Lillard, I do like Murray, I do like Rubio. There are only so many point guards you can play, but I think that's just fine. Enes Kanter, 24%. I would have more than that. Right now, I have him for 29 minutes, 28 minutes, 28 or 29 minutes, and scoring above 35. That's just too good for 5,500. The matchup is strong with this one. We have Damian Lillard at 23 and Russell Westbrook at 21 on DK, but Lillard is saving you $600. I will still slightly prefer Lillard at the moment. I basically have them ranked identically because of the fact I have Lillard a few points higher right now and a few points lower if Paul George is out. And I said that was a 50-50, so ipso facto, prestidigitato, we'll call those guys basically even at the moment for me. Trae Young at 8,300 is at 22%. I like that too. Stacks well with Lillard. Again, I think that number's about right. $7,000 for JaVale McGee. Yeah, we have him at 21%. I suspect I would be a little less than that. Mo Harkless, 21%. I like Mo a lot. Matchup's good, and the price is too light on DK. I'm going to say that's about right again. Not take a strong take. John Collins, 2,100. I think I would come in over that. If shit doesn't go weird in this matchup, he should give you 20 and 10 plus some other ephemera. 6,900 is just getting a little too cheap for him. Justin Anderson at 18% I think is ludicrous, and people should have their head checked. There's just, again, rule number one. If there was one thing I did this year, if I made everyone in the world collectively $4 million, and it might be that much at 2,000 people a day by 200 days, or let's say it was $4 million, probably 2.5 of that was don't play the shitty chalk with a real floor. There's a real floor for Justin Anderson. Is it possible that, Lloyd gets in there and goes, I just decided to give Justin Anderson a night, and even though Bazemore and Bembry had been playing ahead of him and playing more minutes and are better at basketball, I'm gonna give 26 minutes to Justin Anderson? Yeah, it's possible. I'm still sticking with a number in the teens, and again, he's not actually good, which should also factor into your calculation somewhere. Towns, 16%. I'd probably want a little more than that. That's delicious. Gobert, 16%. I definitely want a little more than that. That's delicious. Klay Thompson, 16. I would come in under that. Never going to be a bad play. Terrible matchup. Klay Thompson can just make 15 three-pointers. That generally makes you look pretty good when it happens. But I would have more of Steph Curry. We have it 1% less, though obviously that price is up. All 5 players there does reduce his efficacy and efficiency. But yeah, I would still rather have Steph. Jamal Murray, 5,900, 15%. As related, I would have more than that. LeBron James, 14%. I would have more than that. DeMarcus Cousins, 14%. That's about where I would be. I would have him after Gobert, after Nurkic, but I like him just plenty. Al Horford, 14%. Again, I would come in under that. The matchup pretty dreadful. Steven Adams, 14%. I like playing Steven Adams whenever I can. You are looking at potentially more of an upside in the absence, potentially, of Paul George. But at present, I'd probably come in under that, but makes an interesting Nurk pivot. But again, if Nurk is 24 and he's 14, you're not getting that much better. Irving, 13%, I've spoken at length. Rondo, 13%, I think is fine. Tatum, 13%, I think is fine. Joe Ingles, 12 or 13% for my old eyes there. The matchup is obviously ideal. Most of these Jazz players are going to make some sense. Again, sort of the same thing with Steven Adams, where these guys have a, I don't know if predictable pattern, but a standard distribution of games where they're shitty, shitty, okay, great, okay, shitty, great, okay, and they have a great game and all of a sudden their ownership goes up by 15%. That's not a good way to play DFS. So sure, Joe Ingles just missed a triple-double by one stat, and sure, Steven Adams gave you a 50-burger. Their ownership's swell. That is not the time I like to go onto that, guys. They obviously contain an upside. Darren Collison, 12% against Boston. Played 24 minutes last game. I think that's crackers. Dedmon, 12. That feels fine. Tyus, 12. A little more than I'd want, but seems fine. Bembry, 39. With Anderson starting now, that pushes him pretty low for me. I'd come in under that. Wiggins, 61. I feel good about. Turner, 6,000 is fine. Jeremy Grant, 52, doing a news check and a question check. Collins or Millsap in a DK GPP? I slightly prefer Collins at 6,900 to Millsap at 6,200. If price is not a factor, that is very easily John Collins for me. I like Millsap just fine as well. has played really well. Just had some shooting woes transitionally over a few games recently. Oh my God. Westy and Morris or Young and Grant on FanDuel. Morris would probably be a drop. I'm fine with both of those. It is interesting that you're sort of splitting your things that are good with Paul George out, where you have Westy on one, Jeremy Grant on the other. I would probably be more inclined to play. That's really close for me. I would probably play Westy and Markieff, but that's very close for me. I mean, I suppose I should restate specifically for the record, Westbrook without George does carry a very, very, very nice upside. Here's a narrative for you. OKC not worried about winning tonight's game, would actually like a first-round matchup with Denver, first-time playoff team. Let's look at the standings real quick, because I am sure they would also like a first-round matchup with Portland. So let's see where those sit at the moment. I do not consider that an irrelevant factor, and being all by myself here today, did a lot of research and did not recheck the standings. Right now, Oklahoma City are 7th. Denver is 2nd. Yeah, I will outright disagree with you. If they win, they will tie with the Clippers, conceivably move from the 7 to the 6 and go from Denver to Portland. I will go ahead and tell you I think they would rather play Portland. So in a vacuum, I think you're right, but yeah, the Blazers lineup is out. It is who we expected. Lillard, Layman, Harkless, Aminu, Cantor. The Hawks will start Young, Huerter, Anderson, Collins, and Dedmon. Again, both as we expected, if somewhat perplexing when looking at that squad with Justin Anderson in there. I won't lie. I did not expect that. Looking around for additional things to talk about. I appreciate that. I'm glad you made money last night. Hopefully you do so again this evening. That is always the goal. I particularly enjoy people who are like, oh, they're keeping all the best information for themselves. A couple flaws with that theorem. One, I'm not allowed to play myself due to my day job, so that would be particularly stupid and craven on my part. But secondly, I can't begin to overstate how much of a compliment that is that you think we're capable of collectively, because sometimes people accuse sites of, we all get together and chat about the games and then decide that we're going to release this information and not this information, which I find flattering, because I can't speak for anyone else. I am busy enough that I do not think I would very easily have the brain power to, meet with the rest of the team and, discuss the good plays and then how we're not going to share those good plays because we're so devious. Looking for news as we come down to lock here. Just over a minute until we lock them. And 7 minutes after that till baseball lock, for those of you who are interested. Not seeing anything. Last question. Thoughts on Jeremy Grant on DK? I think he is fine to good. DK, Millsap, Hernan Gomez, Trey, or Cantor Collins favors. I would slightly prefer Cantor Collins favors. Nice Drogic call again last night. You are both very kind. Thoughts on Marvin DK? I think he's good at 4K. There is some risk there. I don't feel terribly solid in that the minutes will be everything we want them to be. But I like Marvin. I think he's just fine if you can get some Marvin in your life. And yeah, other things. Looking for some news, not saying any. Nothing. Nothing, honey. I got nothing, kids. And we are locked. So there it is. Let's go ahead and take a look at the single game ownership on DraftKings. Not even logged in. Let's see. What did they run tonight? We get another 200, 250. Price is obviously coming down. 250. Okay. All right, not bad. I'll take it with baseball going. I think we filled it up, so that's good. Did it fill? Let me look. Looks like it filled. Yep, filled. So that's good. You don't want them to pull the rug out too early with everyone playing baseball. I don't know if DraftKings is having a problem. I'm loading very slowly. Looked at 2 lineups so far, neither of which had anyone from this early game. I suspect I'm not going to like any of these numbers. Just seemed in a single lineup as a game I would want to avoid. Number 1, Al Horford, 12. That's fine. That's fine. He's 6,000. You could play him at forward. I'm completely fine with that. Number 2, slightly less, 11.62 for Horford, 11.49 for Kyrie. I believe, let me refresh our final ownership, that comes in a decent bit below our expectations. I think we had 14, so just a hair under, if I'm remembering this at all correctly. Let's see. Let's see. We had him 17, so he came in under that. Must have been all those people listening to me realizing it's not a good idea. Self-congratulation. Bojan, 10%. Miles Turner, 10%. Okay, 6K. Again, probably slightly prefer that to Horford, but again, have to use a pure center spot. Tatum, 9%. Sure. Sabonis, 9%. Fine. The Deuce, 5. Fine. Hayward, 3.3. I'm fine with that. He's, been getting his 30 minutes. 4,600 is a pretty cheap price tag. 3%. I'm fine with that. Marcus Smart, 3%. Same deal. Wesley Matthews, 2.4%. Again, at $4,000, 2%. 6-game slate. That works out. Reek, 2%. Same deal. Darren Collison, 1.5%. Okay, so ownership went large on that one. People were appropriately trepidatious of Darren Collison. That's a fine number for him. Marcus Morris, 1.23. I like that a lot. Now, again, on DK, you were spending the same price as Jason Tatum. I think I actually ended up with... Hold on. I had Marcus Morris for 0.25 fantasy points more. So, certainly at 1% versus 9 for Jason Tatum. I guess I prefer Marcus Morris. Both of them, again, a little dicey in this matchup. Jaylen Brown, 0.84. Terry Rozier, 0.4. Aaron Baines, 0.2. Doug McDermott, 0.18. Never the answer. Daniel Tice, 0.08. Kojo, 0.08. Aaron Holiday, 0.04. Greg Monroe, 0.01. He is there. Gershon Yabusele, 0.01. Robert Williams, 0.01 is available to play. Semi Ojale, 0.01. TJ Leaf, 0.01. Kyle O'Quinn, 0.01. 2 days in a row, nobody played themselves. Now, again, it was one game with... Was there anyone actually out for... I mean, other than running your Victor Oladipo out there, could you play yourself taking players from this game? Because don't get me wrong, people basically played themselves with some of those plays. Yeah, there is nobody out from this game who hasn't been out for months. Right? All the Celtics are healthy, and for the Pacers, it's Oladipo. So, I guess nobody playing themselves, not that impressive when it was basically nobody picked Victor Oladipo. So, low bar for you to hurdle there, public, but you did so admirably. That is it. I am done. I will assuredly be back again tomorrow in this, my own personal purgatory. All by my lonesome, talking me to you. Send me tweets tonight if I did you wrong, if I did you well. And best of luck. It went very well yesterday, and let us hope for a redux this evening. So you can follow me on the Twitter sphere at FastEddieFear. And best of luck tonight in your contest.